Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, today is the 60th Parliament of Victoria. We say sorry. We say sorry to every victim, survivor of child sexual abuse in Victorian government schools. Speaker, I say sorry because it's the right thing to do. To those victim survivors, to their families and supporters, I am sorry you were not kept safe. I am sorry that when evil was done to you, you could not speak up. I am sorry that when you did speak, you were not believed. I'm sorry that this state, its employees, its policymakers, its public servants, collectively failed to keep you safe when it was the state that was trusted with your care. Speaker, the journey to this day has been far too long. The Board of Inquiry found sexual abuse occurred at Beaumaris Primary School from the 1960s to the end of the 1990s. It found the Department of Education never reviewed those allegations, even as more concerns emerged in 2000 and in 2001. Some 20 years later, Stuart Grimley, then a member of the Legislative Council, began to listen to survivors, including from Beaumaris. Together with his advisor, Olivia Nichols, they built relationships of trust that others had failed to earn. On the 6th of December 2021, one of those survivors, Glenn Fearnett, wrote to me. Glenn told me what happened at Beaumaris in the 1970s and in the 1980s and across the Education Department. He wrote of 4 offenders at one school, each moved there after offending elsewhere, each moved on after being forced out, and each convicted. He wrote that the scale of it was, in his words, mind-boggling, and that offenders remained in state schools until 1993, until 1995. He pointed me to the ABC's Russell Jackson, who spent the time listening to victim survivors and telling their stories. Speaker, I say today that I'm ashamed of the reply that I sent Glenn that day. I told him his concerns were a matter for Victoria Police, and I urged him in the strongest terms to take them there. There were many reasons for my response at the time, some of them deeply personal. Part of the reason was because of what I'd seen and heard working at Catholic Education Melbourne during the Betrayal of Trust inquiry. An inquiry that I commend former Premier Baillieu for establishing and Ms Crozier from the other place for chairing. An inquiry that led to the establishment of the Royal Commission. I believe then, as I do now, that organisations accused of such crimes should never investigate themselves. But what I failed to recognise in Glenn's email was far simpler and far more important. He was not asking me to investigate or to solve a problem. He was asking me, like every survivor since, simply to listen. On the 21st of September 2022 in Queen's Hall, Liv introduced me to Glenn, the same day that Stuart moved a motion in the Legislative Council calling on the then Premier to apologise and for the government to comply with its own model litigant guidelines. That motion passed the Council unanimously. Now, after the 2022 election, Stuart was not returned. I then made an active decision to pick up where he had left off. In early 2023, on 3 occasions, in this place, I sought leave to establish a joint select committee into abuse in government schools. Each time, leave was denied. In June of that year, the government established the Board of Inquiry into abuse at Beaumaris Primary School. I was pleased that this action was taken, but I was also somewhat disappointed because the focus remained just Beaumaris. Speaking for context, I say just Beaumaris, but for me it was somewhat personal. I attended Stella Maris Primary School in Beaumaris in the early 1990s, just 1.5 kilometres down the road from Beaumaris Primary School at a time when abuse was still occurring there. And as I've said before, Beaumaris is only the tip of the iceberg. That inquiry, driven by victim survivors and Stuart, was the necessary lightning rod for something much greater. In the same way, Speaker, that religious institutions moved clergy from parish to parish, the Department of Education moved its offenders from school to school. The crimes committed were not just at Beaumaris. They were across all government schools, and they were likely equal to, perhaps greater than, those committed in non-government institutions. And yet it has taken until 2026 for this Parliament to say sorry. Focusing only on Beaumaris shut other survivors out, like Ingrid from Beaumaris North Primary School, just a kilometre down the road, who wrote to me in February 2023 about the sexual abuse she was subjected to as a child at that school. That is why the government was right to adopt recommendation 3 in full of the Beaumaris inquiry and establish the Forum for Truth and Recognition. That forum's report has now been tabled, and we await the department's parallel review and the government's formal response to both. Speaker, 38 victim survivors told the Forum their stories. Their words matter more than mine ever will. Grant Holland told the Forum that sharing his story is scary, but in his words it means, quote, you feel less alone. James told the Forum he wants to be, in his words, a voice that is heard so others find courage to speak their truth. Daz Gibbs, first abused at just 3 years old, told the Forum simply, I'm here and I'm alive. I'm doing okay. One survivor, known only as Betty, described what was done to her plainly. Not an experience, a crime. She'd carried that alone for over 30 years before finding the strength to speak. Speaker, these are not stories from a distant past we can leave behind. They are the lived reality of people in our community whose trust we should never take lightly. I think of Glenn, who first wrote to me in 2021, of Tim, Richard, Ingrid and every survivor who trusted me and this Parliament with their story. Their courage brought us to this day. Our task now is to be worthy of it every day after. This apology is not the end of our obligation, it is the beginning. We owe every survivor more than words. We owe them a system that finally truly protects children. Speaker, I must say an apology like this is never the work of one person. It's an opportunity to remind ourselves that in some way we all stand on the shoulders of those that have gone before us, carrying a great responsibility. To Stuart Grimley and to Olivia Nichols, thank you for listening and building trust when others didn't. To every victim survivor, your family and supporters who come forward, thank you. To Russell Jackson, thank you for being a journalist, not just a reporter. A journalist that gave voice to survivors when almost no one else was listening. And to colleagues across the Parliament who stood with survivors in their own way. I especially want to mention the member for Hastings and the member for Steve McGee, Melton, the member for Melton, sorry, Steve. Forgive me, mate. Speaker, today we have a chance as a Parliament and as a state to acknowledge the crimes committed against innocent and vulnerable children in our government schools. We cannot undo what has been done, but we can tell the truth about it and make sure it's never buried, dismissed or hidden again. This apology must not be where our efforts end, it must be where it deepens. We owe survivors more than sorrow. We owe them a system that learns, that listens and never looks away again. That's one of the reasons why the opposition has agreed to, Speaker, include mandatory grooming awareness and abuse identification training as part of the Working with Children Check application process. I also want to say this today. Beaumaris Primary School today, it's an excellent school. with outstanding teaching and learning, with outstanding principal leadership, led by David Tapp and his assistant principals, Grace and Kelly, who I believe are in the parliamentary building today. Their staff are deeply committed to child safety. That is what we owe every survivor, not just an apology for the past, but proof that lessons have been learned and a commitment to treat every Victorian with dignity and with respect. Speaker, in closing, this Parliament during this apology today has heard many words. Now, the time for words has concluded. From this point, every one of us must be judged solely on our actions. Thank you.